Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending which part of the world you're in. You're very welcome, and thank you very much for joining me for our second part of our webinar series. I'm Sean McLaughlin, and I'll be with you for the next hour, thereabouts. So again, just like last week, if you have any questions, use the chat pod on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll also have a couple of polls throughout the session. We have 3 polls. So again, if you can participate in that, that would be wonderful just to get your views on things. And if you have any questions, again, you can use the question pod just on the right-hand side of your screen. So as I said, this is part 2 of our Peak Leadership series. And again, what I'll do is I'll just quickly go through recap what we covered last week, outline what we're going to do this week, and then from there we'll have hopefully an interesting next 60 minutes thereabouts. So if we kind of look at it, last week was very much around planning our day, our week, our month. When we're managing our teams, it takes up a lot of time. We need to be able to set aside time specifically for our teams to be proactive about managing the team. So last week was really around how do we ensure that we can set aside some time? How can we be sure that we make sure that we have enough time left over in our busy schedule? So the first thing we looked at, and we covered 4 key principles, but the first one was planning and scheduling in order to get the important stuff done. And the key element there is that not only do we need to plan out our day, our week, our month, but we must schedule it as well. We must make sure the important activities are put into our diaries so they'll get done, and they get done consistently. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we set aside some team time, which we'll have a look at today. The second principle for me is the game changer. That's the time management balance sheet. And that is where we work out every day how much time we got available and also how much time do we need to get all the important stuff done. Every day is different. Some days we'll have 3 or 4 hours available. Other days we might have 5 or 6 hours available because of meetings, clients, stuff that's already in our diary. It means that we don't have a full day available every single day. So it's different amount of times. But we need to know how much time we got available so we then can allocate that time to ensure really important things get done. And if we keep planning and scheduling, it means that we keep on top of things. The third and fourth principles is trying to find out where's our time being stolen from us? Where are the interruptions coming from? As managers, you're very, very busy people, but it also means that lots of people are trying to take time from you. Some of it is value added. It's important time. They're given information. Their time with clients, time with other departments. Others, you kind of say, how useful was that time? How useful was it? So from that point of view, we need to do a time audit. And that demonstrates not a timesheet, a time audit to find out exactly how our time is spent. And you do that once every 2 or 3 weeks just to kind of get a gauge of how is your time be taken from you. And then we use the impact influence model to ensure that we get rid of the activities that are taking off a lot of our time, but we have control over, that's not adding any value to our day. And if we do that particularly well, that should free up some what I call team time. And that's what today's webinar is about. It's about building a performance-based relationship with everybody on our team to ensure we get the best performance out of the team. To do that, we got to be proactive. We got to set aside some time. And what we're going to talk about today is embedding the ways of working to establish within our team that this is what we do around here. This is how we do things. And it promotes a performance-based culture. And it builds clarity around the standards, what are the sort of goals. And it also feeds into when we talk about in session 4 about performance management and to make that part and parcel of the way we do things. Specifically today, we will look at 3 key areas of making sure the ways of working and everybody understands it. And that's delegation. And we look at delegation and see how we can do that. And also then dealing with conflict situations. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. Sometimes there's issues that need to be dealt with. So how do we do that in a very constructive way? And again, creating, this is how we do it in our team. Here's how we deal with difficult situations. And the last bit we have a look at is how do we ensure we have team meetings that are much more engaging, team meetings that people get something out of it, and it's not wasting time. It's not one of these things we got to do it every week. It's just, it's in the diary, so every Monday we have a team meeting. We want them to be much more than that. We want them to be adding value to the team and the team's performance. So just like last week, we need to continue our action plan, and these are the actions and the ideas that you're going to implement over the next 100 days, and hopefully you started some of them last week, and that some of them are already up and running. But really what you do is you make 3 columns, and in the first column you write what you're going to start doing. In the second column, you write what you're going to stop doing. And in the third column, you write what you're going to do more of. And if you have 2 or 3 ideas in each of those columns, then suddenly you have a really comprehensive action plan that you can start implementing straight away for the benefit of your team and ultimately the benefit of yourself. So let's look at peak leadership. And this is what this program is all about. It's continuation of the program we started last year, and it underpins how we go about managing our team. P stands for performance is challenged. We need to constantly challenge the performance of everybody and how they're doing their jobs, and that's to make sure that we are the best we possibly can. Okay, and that's what we strive to do. And part of that today is writing down and establishing the ways of working. Here's how we do things. Here's how we challenge people. But we got to challenge people in the right way. And that needs the environment needs to be created in which people feel comfortable being challenged. Again, this is part of the ways of working, the right environment. So and there's a fine line that we got to be very careful about. If we go and do it wrong, we may come across as being too demanding, never satisfied, almost bordering on bullying, rather than being supportive, driving the team forward, being an inspiration to the team. And it's just the way as a manager how you set that up and creating that environment. And then you've got to make sure that we align everybody's efforts. All the goals need to be aligned. And that's again why the ways of working are so important. It's about understanding how everybody on the team impacts the overall business plan, impacts the performance of the team, and the role they play in making that happen. And the K is to keep everybody engaged, that everybody is focused and everybody's willing to put in the effort. So we're going to look at how we use peak leadership to build a performance-based culture within the team. Okay, so that's what we keep in the back of mind, and peak leadership will underpin everything we talk about. So I'm just going to start with the first poll, and really what the first poll is about. Last week we were talking about ensuring that we have time and use our time well, and the 4 principles to help us do that. One of the reasons why we need to ensure that we're using our time wisely is that we can set aside some team time, and team time helps us to pull everything together. It pull all the pieces of the jigsaw together, so therefore everybody's pulling the one direction. Okay, great teams don't happen by chance. They come together because of great leadership, great management. So our first poll, we're just going to open up, and I'll just have it here now. So it's up on your screen there. Do you set aside 30 minutes per day for your team? Do you do that always, sometimes, or never? Okay, so just on your buzzers there, and you can see some of you are quick on the buzzers. So if you're in a group, just somebody vote on behalf of the group. So if there's a number of you in the room listening, just put a show of hands, and then whichever is the most, put that in. You can see now most are in the sometimes to never. Okay, so we have about 40% of you saying sometimes, 50% is never, and 10% thereabouts always. That's that's dropped to 5% now, or always. So you can see, and the vast majority of you, and again, thanks everybody for voting there. The vast majority of people are in the never or sometimes category, and that's pretty much in line with my findings when I do this work in, we say, workshops and talking to people. And a lot of it is down to the fact that, oh, we're busy all the time. But when time short managers look at their month, what they do is they see a clear month, nothing in it, but suddenly it starts this blank canvas starts to fill up quite quickly. and things start dropping into the calendar: meetings, projects, monthly reports, all these things start to fill up. And what starts getting pushed to one side is the time that they thought they were going to spend on their team. The time that they said, okay, yeah, we must do some team activities. I must work on my team, must do some coaching. And as accountants, we very well clear that time is money and that time is billable. So can we almost afford to set aside 30 billable minutes for our team? And it's a real challenge in the minds of some managers. I could be actually working on a client's account here rather than talking to my team or doing something with my team. But let's look at, in a very serious level, what happens when time-short managers fail to address the issue of setting aside some time. Because what happens is they won't have time set aside for coaching, to coach their team. So they'll end up, that becomes very counterproductive. The less time you spend coaching your team, the more you have to do as the manager, because the job still has to get done. The team doesn't grow, the team doesn't develop. But more importantly, your talented people will start thinking about, should I be staying here? I'm not being developed. I'm not learning anything here. I'm just doing the same tasks over and over again. If you don't set aside time to improve communication within the team, having good team meetings, finding out what's kind of going on, having people feeling they have access to you, that you're approachable. But again, when it comes to the ways of working, how should we communicate as a team? Does everybody communicate in the way that they should? Creating this learning culture that not only are they learning from you, but they're learning from one another. When mistakes happen, is that part of the learning culture? So instead of being blame and fixing mistakes and having a blame culture, it's a learning opportunity. How often do you sit down with your team and have a good performance conversation? Do you do that once a month? Once a quarter? Half yearly? Yearly? How often do we actually do it? How often do we need to sit down with people on our team to have a really meaningful performance conversation? And again, we look at that in session 4. Today, we'll be looking at, how do we delegate? Do we set aside time for delegating? Why should we? What's important about delegating? Are we strategic focused? Are our team strategic focused? Do we want to become a more strategic focused as a team? Networking, building relationships with the team, with other teams, with clients. These things don't happen by chance. You've got to make them happen. You've got to be the leader in the team and set aside team time. When I asked you at the start of last week's session, if I gave you an extra 30 minutes per day, what would you do with it? How many of you wrote down, I would spend it developing my team, working with my team, improving communication, creating a learning culture, improving the meetings we have as a team, okay? Managing my team, spending 30 minutes a day to purely manage my team to get the best performance out of them. And that, for me, is what you should be focusing your attention on. You should be looking at, how can I set aside 30 minutes per day, whether that's 3 times a week, get that started, and then get it up to every day. Set goals for yourself. So therefore, your team will improve. Because your team is made up of all these little cogs, and all these cogs are important when it comes to performance. And just have one cog not pulling in the right direction, having conflict within the team, can have a major impact on the performance. Not understanding what they should be doing, again, will impact the performance of the team. And one of the things we need to really get clear, for all of these cogs to move in the one way as a team, as a really coherent team, is that people have different working styles. And these things can cause problems. One person's style of working can be at odds with somebody else's style of working. Indeed, can be at odds the way you like things done. So what we need to start off with, if you want to really manage their team in a positive way and get the best performance out of everybody, we need to get this question that everybody can answer. Does everybody know how things are done on the team? Okay, do they all understand how meetings are held, how we communicate, how we problem solve, how we give feedback? Does everybody understand all of these things, how you kind of do it? What tends to happen, people find out to trial and error. They make mistakes, they hand in a report, and then over a bit of time they realize, oh, you just like a one-pager. Or you might be the sort of manager likes a 3-page summary. But it's only through trial and error that they find out exactly what your style is. So we need to find out a little bit more about our team and all of these cogs, how they like to be managed. And what's interesting is when you get down and have that conversation, lots of times people like to be managed differently, and often different to the way you're currently managing them. Some people will like tight controls, that style of management. Other people will like a much more hands-off approach. But you need to find that out. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to manage them in that style, because you might need to have a little bit more hands-on and more up-to-date information from them. But the critical thing is, at least you then know. How do they like to communicate with you? How you like them to communicate with you? How you want to communicate with the team? How often should you communicate as a team? Do you have team meetings once a week? How you deal with problems? How you solve them? How you solve them in a way that everybody feels comfortable with dealing problems? How you delegate? Constructive team meetings, get the best out of team meetings. And again, we'll have a look at that there today. How do you coach? How does everybody else learn within the team? What's their coaching style? What style of coaching do people like? How do you give feedback? How do people receive feedback? All of these are ways of working that you need to establish, so therefore the team is working as effectively and as efficiently as possible. One of the ways that I often will do this is a simple exercise I do when I'm working with teams is do's and don'ts. You see me using this quite a lot when I'm talking about teams, because it's a very simple exercise, and you just get people to write down. So say for argument's sake, you're talking about communication, you'll write down what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to communication. How do you like me as the manager to communicate with you? What are your do's? What are your don'ts? And you equally do the same. And what it does is it opens up a really good conversation, because once you find that out, and some people might say, I like you to communicate with me through email. But that could be the opposite to the way you like to communicate. You like to do it face-to-face. So it opens up a conversation around, why is it through email? Why do you prefer face-to-face? When should we do it through email? When should we do it through face-to-face? But it gets a better, clearer understanding of people's likes and dislikes. And then you can then see what you can actually do to come to a much more positive way of interacting with one another. So we need to have a look at that. So in order we build this performance-based relationship within the team, and that's based around understanding do's and don'ts. Okay, and that's where we have a look. So let's look at how we can deal with some of these. No matter what way you have a team, there's going to be conflicts. And some people will see the glass half full, others see it as half empty. And who's right, who's wrong in that situation? Is it half full, is it half empty? It's just the way people see things. So we can't avoid all conflicts. Indeed, I would argue that having no conflict at all may be kind of bad for your team, because it could be bad for business, in the sense of nobody debates things, nobody disagrees with anybody, nobody argues their point of view. Everybody's just kind of gone along, go with the flow type of thing. And sometimes that can be as bad as negative conflict, because nobody challenges anything. And it could become what's known as groupthink, where everybody just thinks the same way. And that can be as damaging to the team as negative conflict. But what I want to have a chat to you about is when it does become a sort of a negative conflict, or a conflict or a problem that you have to solve, then you need to take this three-step approach, which is the 3 E's. You need to establish, first of all, a better understanding of what is the problem. Okay, and then you need to explore a little bit further to find out, okay, how, is this a real problem? What's the cause of the problem? Get a little bit more understanding of that, and then we got to future base the problem. We got to explain what can we do to move forward, and that's really critical. So let's look at the 3 E's and these three this approach. As I said, the first one is step 1 is to establish. It sounds fairly obvious, but I've been involved in dealing with lots of conflicts over the years where I'm asked to come in and try to kind of see what's kind of going on. And the first thing I always talk to people on both sides of the conflict is just to find what the problem actually is from their point of view. And interestingly enough, there's often conflicting views around what the conflict is actually about. And one person will say one thing and the other person will say something else, and they're not even agreeing on what the problem actually is. And so we need to establish at this stage all the facts. Make no assumptions. If you're as a manager or dealing with a conflict with somebody on your team or between two people on your team, do not jump in, do not make assumptions, do not use past experience with the people to judge or cloud this particular situation. And just because one person has always been wrong previously, they may not be at fault in this particular situation. So you need to address each problem on its own merits. Okay, so get the person to explain the situation from their point of view first of all. If there's a third party involved, talk to them rather than accept one person's view of a version of the events. It's very, very important that at this stage that you always deal with the facts. Okay, you don't make assumptions and you don't allow other people to make assumptions. So always focus on the facts. So if you're not sure of something, get clarification again. Get them to talk through it a second time. At this stage of the process, it's all about listening. Okay, no jumping in, no trying to get a quick solution to the problem. No, the minute you hear one thing, say, right, let's fix it, let's move on. Just sit and listen to all the facts. This is where you have to start showing a bit of empathy. Emotions can be quite high when people are starting to give their side of the conflict or the argument or the disagreement, and they're rarely listening to the other person. They just want to get out there where they're coming from. They want to be heard. So your role here is to listen to that person. Don't interrupt them. Seek a little bit of clarification if you have, but don't jump in and start trying to fix anything at this stage. You need to get the full picture before you move on. Okay, all the facts need to be established and have it. And what I tend to do is that when they come in towards the end of telling the story, I just summarize it back. So here's the picture I have in my mind of what you're just after saying, and you describe that back to the person. Okay, this is what I'm hearing from you, and you outline it. That gives them a chance to either say, no, you're not getting the full picture here, or you're not understanding what I'm saying, and say, okay, talk me through it again, until they're satisfied that you fully understand where they're coming from. And same with the other person. Okay, so at this stage, you're making no decisions, you're taking no sides. Now, what often again happens, once we got the full picture, we think that's it. But it's not. Step 2 is really important because we now need to explore it a little bit further. We got to take a little bit of a broader view, this sort of panoramic sort of view of the situation. You got to make sure that you're resolving the right problem. Okay, because sometimes what people are saying is the problem. When you explore it a little bit further, there could be other issues that are kind of going on that are really causing the real cause of the conflict, as opposed to the perceived opinion of what that cause is. Always check a little bit more around how valid what they're saying actually is. Okay, is it their opinion, or now challenge some of the facts, or is it based on facts? And dealing with rumors, dealing with what half-hearted pieces of information doesn't help. Okay, so what we got to do is, if we want to really solve the problem, we got to get to the root cause of the problem. Otherwise, as you gardeners will always know, if we get rid of the weed is gone, the root is still there. If you didn't dig out the root, the weed will come back again. So in other words, if we kind of quickly try to solve the problem without getting to the root cause of it, it will resurface again in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. We haven't dealt with the real issue. So we got to understand what the real issue is by exploring. And exploring is all around, as Peter Drucker says, is around the questioning. The important and difficult job is never to find the right answer, is to find the right question. Okay, and we'll do this, we'll see this in later when we're talking about giving feedback. It's the same principles are applicable. We need to uncover the true facts around the problem. So what exactly is your understanding of the situation? Sometimes I would ask the person to give me what is their understanding of the situation from the other person's point of view. Why do they believe the other person is so upset or annoyed? To see, do they understand where the other person's coming at all? Is there any empathy kind of going on between the two people? I would acknowledge where you agree or disagree, or where the two parties agree or disagree, but exploring a little bit further. Now, what's really critical here when you're probing is you don't make the situation worse, and that people become sort of far more defensive. Okay, so we got to be very careful that that doesn't happen. Okay, so what we got to do is to make sure that we probe. So tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about what's kind of going on. Tell me a little bit more why you feel that way. Tell me a little bit more about why it's so upsetting for you, and just probe and check the reality and identify, some of the key concerns that the person might actually happen. At this stage, we're into total active listening mode. Okay, this is where people are just focusing on, I'm totally listening to you. I'm not, again, making any jumping in, rushing to judgment, or rushing to trying to solve the problem. I'm totally listening. And this is again where you show your empathy. Again, we now clarify once again before we move on. So once we clarify, we say, now I understand what the problem actually is. I understand the causes of the problem. I understand where both parties are coming from. Now we got to go into future mode. Now we got to go into solving the problem. Okay, and we got to get people focusing on the future. We can't change the past, so we got to focus on the future. We want everybody to come out of this feeling like they're a winner, feeling like they've been either heard, feeling like they've got some sort of closure on what the problem actually is. Okay, so that's really critical. So what we got to do here is explain what exactly is it we can do to go forward. Okay, we need to agree a way forward, and we need to take a commitment to moving the problem forward. We need to make a commitment that here, let everybody leave on a positive note, and to ensure that everybody felt that they've been listened to, that the process was fair, and that they can then live with whatever the suggestions are for moving forward. The critical thing here, the solutions in the future and the problem should be in the past. Okay, so future-based dealing with conflict. Okay, and leave the past, leave the problem behind you, and get everybody moving forward. To finish out this step, I would always finish the conversation off with, okay, what have we agreed to do? So that this makes sure there's no misunderstandings. Okay, so finish the conversation with repeating, this is what we agreed to do. This is what I have heard that we're going to, the solution is for both of you to move forward, or you with the person. Here's what each person is going to do. And make sure that they agree, yep, we accept that, that is what we're going to do, and then move forward. And then check in on them in a couple of weeks' time. How are things progressing there? Have we moved forward? And then that's it. Problem dealt with, and we've moved on. Okay. And that's what we got to be thinking about. There's lots of places where conflict can actually happen. One of those is when we're delegating. That can cause problems, which you see in a moment. I'm just going to open the second poll here, and the second poll is: do you view delegation as a way to reduce your workload, a coaching opportunity, or you don't delegate as it's quicker if you do it yourself? Okay, just fingers on the buzzers there, and just when it comes to your voting, do you believe delegation is a way to reduce your workload? Is it a coaching opportunity, or you don't delegate because it's quicker if you do it yourself? Okay, great, thanks. People are voting there now. Okay, good. 84% of you are seen as a coaching opportunity. Just a couple of you don't delegate because it's quicker as you do it yourself. And we have, I don't know whether this is a totally very honest person seeing it as a way of reducing your workload. Okay, that's interesting. We just close that off there. Thanks again for everybody for voting there. For me, I see it as a coaching opportunity, and it really is an important part of your coaching culture, your learning culture. Because what delegation actually is, and this is why I call it the art of delegating. It's you're passing on authority to somebody on your team to make some decisions. Now, I can also understand why that can be quite a challenge for people. Okay, that can become a little bit, why should I do this? But just if you use the chat pod, why is delegating? What are the benefits of delegating? So if you're going to do it and we see it as a coaching opportunity, what are the benefits of delegating? Okay. Frees up some of your time. Absolutely, yeah, it does that. Yeah, develops people. Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes people will use it to check out somebody's ability to do a job at a higher level. Passes on work to other people. Yeah, okay, so that's what it does. It can be motivating, yes, if it's done right. That certainly it can be motivating. Relieves boredom, okay, for the person, because they might be bored doing the same job over again, so they're getting something different. So that's a good point there. So you can see there's lots of benefits to you as a manager when it comes to delegating. And what we got to do is, if we truly see it as a coaching opportunity, we then got to say, okay, how do we do that? How do you do it in a way that people will see it as a coaching opportunity? The first part is probably one of the hardest part as an expert when it comes to delegating, is identifying the full parameters of the task. Because you do the job particularly well, and you do it almost on automatic pilot because you're doing it for a while, trying to explain to somebody what exactly is it that you want done can be quite a challenge. Very often we'll take shortcuts in the sense of we know exactly, and it reminds me with my first book and the editor, a lot of the notes when they were sending it back to me, what happens when I send in the manuscript, the editorial team come back with suggestions. But one of the interesting suggestions that kept coming back was that I wasn't linking one paragraph to the next. There was always kind of like a sentence missing here and there. And so I was talking to the editor, what do you mean by that? And what they said was, you have in your mind very clear the point you're making, but you're coming from the person who understands the point you're making. But the reader is reading it from not understanding the point. So when there's gaps, like a missing sentence here or not explained fully, the person won't fully understand the point you're making, even though it's very clear in your head. And that point always struck with me whenever I'm writing, but also struck with me whenever I'm passing on information or a task or delegating. Have I explained it clearly enough so the person who hasn't done it before will understand it? And all you got to do is look at instructions when it comes to buying something from the local shop, and you have flat pack furniture and you have to put it together. How clear are the instructions there for somebody who's never put it together before? So what I would always say is start with 3 key things that you got to get clear in your mind. Okay. The first thing is we're very often too vague with the task we want them to do. So we got to know what success looks like. Explain to the person what the end result will look like. So get that clear in your head. So if you want a report done, analysis on a set of accounts, what does that analysis look like? What should it contain? What are the critical parts of that report? The second thing is something that never ceases to amaze me, how vague managers are when they're passing on instructions. They'll say things like, there's no hurry, whenever you get a chance, will you do that report? Or do it as soon as possible, or it's urgent. They're all meaningless pieces of information, because what does as soon as possible actually mean? It means different things to different people. Be time specific. I need that done by 3 o'clock on Friday. I need it done by 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Now the person has a better understanding of when they need to hand over the report. Okay, and then you can get a conversation going to see, do they have time to do it in that time frame that you're given? And the last thing is priority level. If this is a coaching session and you're saying that delegation is a coaching opportunity, part of the coaching should be explaining how to prioritize pieces of work. This person could be working on something that's really important. You pass a piece of work on to them. They'll stop what they're working on because they think this is more important or more urgent or whatever the case may be, when in fact the piece of work they were working on was far more important. So explain how to prioritize. So that's part of the coaching culture. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you got to do is identify a suitable person. And now what you're doing here is not just to kind of say Mary or John or whatever, just picking somebody on your team. You got to use the skill will matrix put forward by Max Landsberg. And I really like this because it's nice and simple, and I like using grids because they're easy to use. You can scribble it on a piece of paper and see exactly where people are. And I'll always do this before I delegate a piece of work. And what you're trying to do is high will, high will and low will, and high skill and low skill. And you just put them in one of the 4 boxes, and that will help decide how you're going to brief the person, which we'll talk about in a moment. Where you want the person to be is high will and high skill. In other words, they have the right attitude, they want to do the task, and they know how to do the task. And to delegate to that person is quite straightforward. Now, if you see that somebody has high will below skill, that could be a new person on the team, new trainee, very enthusiastic, love taking on additional piece of work, but they haven't done it before. So we now need to educate them. We now need to focus on coaching our training. So training if they haven't done it before. If they've done it before and they're still not sure, you might do a little bit of coaching, but you're educating the person. The person with the low will and the low skill, this is somebody who's become a little bit disillusioned. It could be somebody who's new enough on the team and their initial enthusiasm is gone because they're not making as much progress as they thought. Things are a little bit more difficult than they thought, and there might be slightly, a little bit just disillusioned. Okay, now what you got to do here is a sequence. You got to motivate first and then educate. There's no point giving them the skills if you haven't worked on their will. So get them motivated, have a chat with them, start explaining things to them, start giving them some support, and then you do a bit of training or coaching to give them the skills. Now, the bottom right-hand corner, low will and high skill. Some of this could be your responsibility for this to actually have happened. This person could have been in the high will, high skill. And there's a tendency for managers, and I've done it myself so often over the years, to punish your good workers and reward your poor workers. And what I mean by that is we punish our good workers by giving them all the pieces of work to do because you know that they will do a good job. And what we tend to do is overload them with work. And as a result of that, they could drop from that delegate box down into the low will because they become frustrated with all the work. And then they're looking around at some of their teammates who are not getting half the work they are. And we don't give the teammates the work because they're always making mistakes. So we got to reboost this person's and remotivate them and get them back up into the high will, high skill. So a quick, simple exercise to do, because that would impact then how you're going to brief this person, how are you going to explain it to them, how are you going to get them on side. And as Einstein says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself. So don't jump in and start, half telling them what to do. Remember the 3 things that you've got to get across in your communication. What the success looks like, so what's the end product look like, when you specifically want it, and what's the priority level. Okay, and explain it in terms of understanding, well, do they have high will and high skill, or low will, low skill, or where do they fit on that? And then we can put the emphasis on how we're going to coach them or train them or get them on track. Step 4 is part of this, keeping them on side, is what support. So if I can say the person is doing the job for the task for the very first time, they may become a little bit scared when you show them the task and explain the full parameters of the task, and they're kind of going through their mind, I won't be able to do this, I won't be able to do this. So you need to let them up front know, here's the support I'm going to give you. We're going to do a couple of coaching sessions, so you're going to make sure that you have the right skills to do this particular task. And again, we got to put on our coaching hat. As you're providing support and as the person's going through and doing the task, and if there's mistakes are made, we got to make sure that we don't jump into correct mode, that we stay and put on our coaching hat. Correct is the quickest way. Now, I do understand that certain situations might lend itself that the report now, the deadline is now approached, they made a few mistakes. It's quicker if you go in, fix those mistakes, and then get the report off to the client or to the board meeting. What you got to then do is, after you fix the mistakes, is to go back to the person and go back into coaching mode. Okay, so if we truly believe delegation is another coaching opportunity, we got to make sure that when mistakes are made, that you provide them with support through coaching and not fixing. Okay, fix if it's time pressure, and then go back and coach. Okay, so that's what's really important. Step 5 for control freaks among us all that likes to keep on top of things, you need to make sure that you could track all the delegated tasks to make sure that they're on track to be completed on time. There's no point finding out 5 minutes before you're looking for the report that they're way behind. And you may have forgotten that you delegated 2 or 3 things to this person. So you got to make sure that you have check-in points along the way, so you know that they're on time, they're on schedule to meet the deadlines that you have given. So don't just delegate, walk away, and then expect that you get the task there on time. If it's somebody new doing it for the first time, if it's somebody that you know that's done it so often that they're always on time, you just do a little bit more checking in, not as much as somebody's doing it for the first time. Remember, you're trying to create a feedback culture. And this is a great opportunity, if you're using delegation and using as coaching, is to create a feedback culture that is just part and parcel of regular conversations. How they're doing, checking in. Here's where we should be by Monday at 4:30. Here's where we should be by 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, so we're on time to have the report done by 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. Okay, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. And the last bit here is something that's often missed when it comes to delegating. And if, again, I keep going back, 83% of you thereabouts said that coaching or delegation is a coaching opportunity. Well, if you don't debrief, you're missing out on a crucial part of the coaching. Debrief is essentially finding out, once the job is complete, what have you both learned from the process? And these are the things you won't find in a book, because these are the things where it's personalized to the individual. So one of the questions that I always ask at the end of when the task is complete, that are delegated: now that you've done the task, what could I have given you earlier that would have made your life easier to get this done? And what I'm learning there is, did I miss out something? Did I not do a bit of coaching? If they got a little bit a template, what would they have got now that they've completed the task? If I'd given them that up front, it would have made their life a little bit easier. And I use that for 2 reasons. One, I know the next time I'm delegating to them something similar, what they might need. But if I'm delegating that specific task to somebody else, that I can actually improve how I delegate. Equally, I will show what I learned from it. How quickly they were able to do it, what other areas that should focus on. The mistakes that they made, we're certainly going back into the coaching mode to see how will they ensure it won't happen again. What did they learn from it? So it's the learning, it's the finishing out the coaching session, and that's what's critical. So just to finish out the ways of working. So we've done the ways of working on how to deal with problems, the ways of working how to delegate, team meetings. And I was doing some work with trainees a couple of weeks ago, and during the course of the session, the team meetings kind of came up. And these trainees were a mixture between somebody who's there just a couple of weeks to somebody who's there about 6 months, thereabouts. So the work I was doing on them was around time management and communication. And one of the things I just asked them, I said, do you have many team meetings, or what do you think about them? And this particular guy was saying that he has lots of one-to-ones with his manager and gets on very well with the managers, and the one-to-ones are going really well, but they tend not to have any team meetings. And I said, okay, does that matter? You know, you get on well with your manager, you know exactly what's expected of you, so that's working particularly well. Why would you want a team meeting? Just to see what his reply was. And it's very interesting. What he felt was that they were all individuals who happened to have the same manager, as opposed to being a team. So that's a very interesting observation. So I got him to develop that a little bit more. So I got him to explain a little bit more why he felt that, or how does it manifest itself. He said, for example, and he said, and one of the other people on the team was actually there when we were talking about it. We were just over a coffee. And he said, I know what I have to do, but I don't know what Victor has to do. Okay, and so why is that important? He said, because I might be able to help him out, or he may be able to help me out, or we could be working on the same thing, or we could be working on separate things, but I don't know. So therefore, I just focus on what I have to do. I never ever wonder what other people are doing. But I just thought it'd be very, very useful if I did know, because then we could help one another out. We might be able to say, I might be able to say, well, I've done something similar like that a couple of weeks ago. Here's a template that I use, and vice versa. So I thought it was a really good observation when it comes to team meetings. How do we ensure that they're actually useful, rather than we just have them because everybody else has them? So it's about getting the best from them. And do your team feel like they're just a bunch of individuals who happen to have the same manager, or do they feel that they're working as a team? So what's your ways of working? Do you want everybody to work as a team? So here's some 6 habits that I would suggest that you could actually use just very quickly to go through to try to ensure. Some of them are very straightforward. But the first thing, and the first habit that I always try to get people to instill, is to have a clearly stated purpose. So at the end of this meeting, what exactly is it that you want to achieve? What exactly is it that people will get from the particular meeting? So when they walk away, for argument's sake, are you there? Is the team meeting that you have at the start of the week, is it about informing people? Is it about, or have you some critical decisions to make? Are you solving a problem? Are you just giving a status update? What exactly is it the purpose of the meeting? Because each meeting might be slightly different. Okay, so you might want to get something different from each meeting. What you don't want a situation is that people come to a meeting without understanding why I'm here. What am I going to contribute to the meeting? What will I get from the meeting? Do I need to bring anything? So for argument's sake, say your meeting is about generating some ideas. So they come along to the meeting with no ideas because they didn't know what the purpose of the meeting were. So they're kind of, and what's even worse, they might even leave the meeting at the end confused about, what was that all about? Am I to do something? Or what's kind of going on? So the first thing is to have a clear purpose, which leads me into the second habit. And I'm just going to finish off with our third poll here. So I'll just open our third poll. Do you create an agenda for each team meeting? Always, sometimes, never. Okay, so just fingers on the buzzers there. Do you create an agenda for each team meeting? Always, sometimes, or never. Okay. Again, great. Thanks for voting. We're quick off it. And you can see there that a good 60% of you are in the sometimes, 30-odd% of you are in always, and just a couple of you are in never. Okay, and again, that's just close that off. Yeah, no surprises there. For me, it should be 100% of the time you have an agenda, and the purpose is linked into agenda. An agenda, there's nothing new with agenda. They've been around for hundreds of years. Agendas aren't new to us. But before I have a meeting, I always do a very quick agenda, and there's 3 things that I always want on an agenda. What are the key priorities? So in other words, what topics do we need to cover in the limited amount of time we have available to us at the meeting? So what do we want to cover? And then what are the outcomes? What am I looking for? And I link that back to the purpose. What exactly is it that I want to get out of these topics? What do we want to achieve? And then critically, I always put in timings. So in other words, how long are we going to spend on each of these topics? So here's a simple agenda template. As you can see there, the top of it is just the purpose. what's the purpose of the meeting? And then on the left-hand side, we see what are the 2 or 3 or whatever number of key topics we're going to have. The 2 middle columns we come back to in a moment. I always then write down who the topic leader is, because it doesn't necessarily mean as the manager of the team that I'll always be the leader. It could be somebody else on the team that's actually talking on that particular topic. So they're the topic leader. And it just means that when the agenda goes out, people can ask questions of the topic leader. And then crucially, to make sure meetings last the appropriate time, how much time are we going to spend on that topic? Is it a 5 minute? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? And that also helps people to understand the importance of it, because if we're going to dedicate 20 minutes out of the 30 minutes we have available to do this particular topic, we then know that that's the main topic we need to get sorted. Which leads me to habit 3. Always, always, always start on time and finish on time. If you call the meeting for 11:15, and always, again, I find it interesting, I would often do meetings on the quarter rather than on the hour, because for some strange reason, everybody does it, oh, meetings at 11 or meeting at 10. Doing it on the quarter sometimes concentrates the mind a little bit more. Okay, so I might have a meeting at 11:15 to 12 o'clock, for instance. So instead of being an hour, it's 45 minutes. And people are much more likely to be focused then. So don't, start 4 minutes late, because then that's eating into everybody's time. So whoever is there, start on time. They'll soon be there on time going forward. Habit 4 is, again, fairly straightforward. It's about rotating the chair sometimes. Okay, so rather than have the same person leading the meeting, sometimes people lose interest then if it's the same person doing it all the time. Rotate it around, that somebody else can lead the meeting. And all they need to know is a couple of things: what the purpose of the meeting is, the expectations of participation during the meeting. They might say that at the start. And the rules should be implicit enough if it's team meetings, like things like mobile phones, agendas, and document everything afterwards. So there's just a couple of things that a team leader needs to do. But I will rotate the chair around for team meetings, so it's not the one person doing it all the time. This habit is something that I got used to a number of years ago because of the number of meetings I went to. Lots of decisions and lots of talking going on. Lots of great ideas were generated. A lot of good talking went on. But I felt at the end, what were the actions again? And I wasn't quite sure who was to do what. So I always end a meeting with asking 2 questions. What have we agreed? So what have we decided to do? And who's doing what? So if you're going to go back to the agenda that I normally use, the 2 middle columns, when your topic has come to a close, record in there what was the decision made at the end of that topic, and what were the actions agreed, and by whom? Who's going to take those actions? So at the end of the meeting, when we're finished, I just go back, okay, just for clarification, point 1, the decision made was, and the actions agreed were, and who's going to take them. And work your way through each of those, because sometimes people say, oh no, that wasn't what we agreed. Okay, my understanding of it was, and here's what I wrote down. So why haven't we agreed on that, or where's the misunderstanding? And we can get clarity. Otherwise, people are leaving a meeting with ambiguity. And the last one, just to finish off, is the obvious one. And if you use the template that I just showed you there, most of the minutes are already completed. Okay, so once you've finished the meeting, do up the minutes fairly quickly. What decisions were made? What key points were made during the conversation, the topic that was discussed? What decision was made? What actions are agreed to be taken, and by whom? So when it comes to the next meeting, you start with what actions, where are we on those actions? And quick update. And that way you make meetings far more action orientated, and minutes are produced. And in that way, if there's any disputes later on in the team, you go back very quickly to it and say, no, this is what we agreed. It's there, it's in writing, and we all signed up to it. The key to really good team meetings and the time that's invested in team meetings is to make sure that you focus on the agenda, the topics that you agree that we're going to talk about, that's action orientated, that at the end of each meeting we agree what actions have to take place, by whom, and that they start and finish on time. Okay, and it's really crucial that you respect people's time when it comes to team meetings. That way, people are more likely to come to team meeting focused, ready to participate, and keep them short, concise, and meaningful. So just as we come towards the end of today's session, just to kind of finish it out, it's really around team time. Setting aside 30 minutes per day and 3 or 4 times a week. Try to get it every day where you're focusing on the team. You're creating a team culture by embedding ways of working. Here's how we do things on our team. Here's how we communicate with one another. Here's how we manage. Here's how my management style fits into how you like to be managed. Here's how we have these difficult conversations. Here's how we deal with problems. Here's how we collaborate with each other. Here's how we delegate. Here's how it's part of our coaching culture, our learning culture. Here's how we get the best performance out of people through delegating. And here's how we engage during team meetings. Here's what I expect of you during team meetings. Here's what you should expect from me. So what is it that you expect from me as the team leader when it comes to team meetings? And get the best quality out of the team meetings going forward. So just a quick reminder of what we're going to cover on next week. We're going to look at a core critical skill that all managers need to develop, and that's the skill of influencing. You're going to be influencing your team, you're going to be influencing other departments, you're going to be influencing clients, you're influencing all the time. But critically, how do you influence people on your team? And we look at certain theories, the push-pull theory. We looked at a structure approach to influencing, and then we'll dovetail into how we use our influencing skills to continue with this coaching mindset and how we structure a coaching session. And we just build on some of the principles we talked about last year when it came to coaching, and finish off making sure that everybody on your team has their own personal learning and development plan. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found the session useful, and thanks very much for your participation in the chats and in the polls. And I look forward to talking to you all again next week where we have session 3. Thanks very much. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week. Cheers.
Amazing. Thanks, Sean.
No problem at all. We got through it.
Yeah, we got through it. No technical thoughts, nothing. So that's
excellent.
smooth sailing. So you're not,